Have you ever thought that when you don't get a job, you miss the interview, or you're just plain told you're not fit for the position? That's a failure? Have you ever thought that you've lost out? Well, today I'm going to discuss a situation in which I did not lose, and it changed the way I thought about interviews forever. One time I interviewed for a position and I didn't get it, but I was told some things, in fact, 5 specific words in a phrase, that changed the way I thought about interviews from then on. So I'd like to share that with you in today's episode. You're trying to make a switch into a tech career and you're in your 30s or 40s. And if you're not, that's okay. This might apply to you as well. When I was in my 30s, I think I was in my late 30s, maybe even early 40s. Yeah, I think it was my late 30s. I had this happen to me. As I recall the story, I was looking for a new job up in the Twin Cities. And was living in Iowa, so if you're not familiar with the Midwest, Iowa, Minnesota connect, but I was about an hour and a half from the border of Iowa, Minnesota. When I was trying to get a job, therefore, in Iowa there were tech jobs, but in Minnesota, having a bigger population, there was a greater prospect of me getting a tech job. So I submitted my resume to positions up in the Twin Cities. I did happen to get a response, and they wanted me to interview with them on site. This was before the days of remote work. So what I would do is I'd tell my family that I'd be heading up to the Twin Cities on such and such a day, and I think this was a Wednesday. So I got my lunch packed. I tried not to eat out too much. Budget was tight. At the time, I had, I think, 5 children. Maybe I had my 6th child. My wife was stay at home. So you can understand my situation was high pressure. Maybe you go through situations like that as well with your family. Or maybe you just feel the pressure to get a tech job and get that high pay income into your budget and into your retirement account. So in my situation, I had that response to my job application, and I was excited to get ready. So if it was a Wednesday, it could have been any day, but I think it was Wednesday. I get up and I start driving, making the 3.5-hour drive from my town in Iowa to Minneapolis downtown, which is where the company was located. I think I had an 11 o'clock interview or something around there. And so when I got into town, I drove in and I was nervous. Not only was I navigating a new city, a larger city than where I lived, but I was also trying at the same time to be calm and prepared. I certainly was praying and asking God to help give me calm nerves and have the right answers to the questions they might ask. When I got into Minneapolis, I looked around and had to find a parking spot. I won't belabor you with all the details of finding parking, but if you're in a new town and it is a few years ago, you might not have all the parking apps or all of the directions on your phone to help you figure out where to park. So my eyes were racing to try to find one of those blue P signs where you can tell where to park. As I was looking for a place to park, I had my lunch next to me, of course. I had, it was warmer, so I didn't need a coat at the time. But I had my suit coat back there in case I wanted to put it on if it was a more formal place in the back of my car. And I also had my computer in case I needed to do something for them and code in front of them or anything like that. Sometimes that happens, by the way. But I learned later on, usually not on your computer in an interview. So I was looking for one of my first jobs. It wasn't my first tech job, but I was out of a job and I needed to level up. So this was high pressure. So let me make a note on that. If you're listening to this podcast and you're already in a high tech position, you're trying to level up, you're going to be going through a lot of the same things you did when you tried to get your first position. Only you'll probably have more positions and experience on your resume than when you first tried to get your job. So, this is a process that you'll be going through. It's maybe not like many other careers where you get your job and you hold it for 40 years. This type of job where you can level up and increase your income with a new job or with a new role, either way, new job or new role, you can usually level up your income. And so that's why that's not why I was out of position. I was out of position, I believe, because of a company that went under that I was working for. So that's a different story for a different podcast episode. So we're back in downtown Minneapolis and you and I are kind of looking for parking spots and we find one eventually. My heart is racing. I know where I'm walking to. It's a couple blocks away. I can still remember seeing the corner of the building, which had kind of a vertical, cool looking sign. So this evidently was more of a startup company. And I didn't know that until I got there. I can't tell the size of the company on the job application. And I probably could have done more research to figure that out, and I should have. But anyway, I find the building, I walk to it. I've got kind of nicer shoes on, and I want to make more of an impression. Not super formal, but not too casual. So I want to treat it with seriousness, but not like I'm interviewing to be a bank CEO or something. You don't want to do that. So I head in the door, and as I do, I'm greeted by one person. It's kind of an open warehouse type feel. And if you've been downtown in cities like Minneapolis or Portland or Indianapolis, or maybe it's any larger, older city downtown, it's kind of a cool thing to turn a warehouse into a tech company headquarters. And that's what this was. So a large, echoey ceiling. None of the ductwork is hidden. It's all up there. You can see it in some of the electrical cables as well. But it was a nice looking place. I could not see many people working there, which was odd. Sometimes you'll see rows of desks lined up and people working, but I could not see any of that. So that was a different look than other places I had worked. Now, we're going to get to the part where I am told some things after my interview, but you need to know, basically to cut to the chase here, my interview was handled by the second person I met, and then I met with a third person. And I think the third person might have been the owner of the company. So a word to the wise here, if you're interviewing in person and it's in the headquarters in a smaller company, there's a good chance you're going to interview with the owner or the founder or the CEO or, something like that, even CTO. In a larger company like Target, of course, also in downtown Minneapolis, you are not going to meet with the CTO unless you're interviewing for a position right under the CTO, of course. So, anyway, that is how my interview went. The results of it, I sat for about 15 minutes and I think they were deliberating. I noticed that I had been sweating. I was just finally trying to relax and trying to look calm, no matter what result I heard about and what they gave me for a verdict. That's how it feels when you're interviewing, is like you're in court. Well, when a gentleman walked out, one of the guys I had interviewed with, very nice, very great company. I do wish I could have worked for them. They, as you can tell, said no. I did not fit the role. Now, my heart dropped. I wondered why in the world I made this huge trip for nothing. And then within a few seconds, the same gentleman said, "But Brooks," and then he said 5 words. He said, "Brooks, you should be a contractor." And I had never heard of the term contractor outside of someone building a house. I said, "Oh, okay. So I know I didn't get this position here, but what does that mean to be a contractor?" And he said, "Well, if you're a contractor, you work jobs that are usually for shorter periods of time, and sometimes you can work for multiple people, multiple companies, organizations, and you can often charge a lot more money per hour than if you were working as an employee somewhere." So that's a summary of what he said, but his 5 words were, "You should be a contractor." I'm counting on my hand to make sure those are 5 words. Yes, they are. So at that moment, I didn't really know much of what he meant. I didn't understand completely what was going on in his head, because why wouldn't he just make me a contractor for his company? Or why didn't he just hire me? The thing was, as a small company, they must have been looking for maybe someone with a different amount of experience, maybe someone with a different kind of experience, maybe someone who, I don't know. I honestly don't know as I look back. And at that moment, I sure didn't know. So you might encounter those circumstances when you're applying to positions where you don't get the position, but you need to hold out some hope for some insight. And I would encourage you to ask, do you have any feedback for why I'm not accepted? Do you have any constructive criticism about how I conducted the interview or anything like that? I didn't have to ask for that on that day when I interviewed in downtown Minneapolis. But I did get the information and the feedback, and I was so thankful. Turns out, after that, I researched more about what it means to be a contractor. And I was open to those positions. I ended up working for a recruiter who wondered if I would take on contracts. And I said yes. And it got me into many doors working for some large companies you've heard about that I don't need to name, but you've heard their names. So, working contracts could be a path for you that you may not have known about before this podcast, or really didn't know anyone who did them. And I am someone who's done them, and I know others who I've helped get into a tech career have done them as well. So I wanted to open that door for you. Maybe you should be a contractor. So I hope that's been very helpful. I hope that you have enjoyed hearing my situation. As I drove back home that day from Minneapolis to my town in northern Iowa, I thank God for the experience. But I think I was very much disappointed. And I think I was pretty down. And I thought, what a waste of a day. But after that, when I took the person's advice, I looked back on that day and said that was a very important day. And I hope that my recollection of that day and the 5 words will help you out in some way as well. Thank you for listening. Hey, thanks for listening today. I'm really thankful that you're here. You took time out of your day and you listened to what I had to say, and thinking that it'd be valuable, and I hope it has been. Now, a question for you. Would you be willing to be interviewed on this podcast? I would love to host the podcast and interview you to learn more about your situation, to tell the world about your situation, and maybe it could get you some recognition or practice at interviews, or even just some good coaching experience. What we'll do is we'll go over your situation, where you are, where you're trying to get, and I will help you on the call figure out some solutions to where you can get your first tech career in your 30s or 40s. You don't even have to let people know your name. If you would like to be anonymous, we'll assign you an ID number, and anyone who contacts the show will be able to get in contact with you if you desire. It's all up to you. Just email info@techlead.com. info@tekleed.com. I went to school for music, not spelling. I hope to hear from you, and I would love to interview and give you some coaching right on the show. Let me know.